Hello everyone and welcome to another game from round 6 of the 2020 Candidates Tournament. It's Alexander Grischuk versus Fabiano Caruana. An exciting game, and again we get to see Fabi's modern Arkhangelsk's variation of the Ruy Lopez at the highest level. It's just insane what Fabi can dig up at home. And before we check out the game, we do have a nice photo of the matchup. There you have it, Fabi and Grischuk. You can see the difference in body positioning. Here you have Fabi, who is still playing his prepared line, and Grischuk, who is trying to work out the madness on the board, trying to get closer to the pieces, as you can see. So let's enjoy that for a second, and let's check out the game. So like in his game against MVL, Grischuk, well, not Grischuk, but Grischuk opens with e4, but Fabi, of course, sorry about that, knows, Grischuk most likely knows that Fabi is going to go for the same line he played against MVL. Knight f3, we have knight to c6 and bishop to b5. The Ruy Lopez is on the board again. a6, bishop to a4, knight to f6, and castles. We have b5 by Fabi, bishop to b3, and bishop to c5. So the modern Arkhangelsk, and we mentioned that it's quite an exciting opening, as it's getting repeated quite a lot, especially by Fabi. A4, we have rook to b8, everything the same as in game Maxime Vachier-Lagrave versus Fabiano Caruana from the candidates. c3, d6, and now d4. Bishop back to b6, and now this a5 move, which we explained why it's off limits to capture it in that video. Maxime versus Fabi, if you haven't seen it, do check it out. So bishop back to a7, and now h3. We have castles, so still following the game against Maxime, bishop to e3, and now in the game against Maxime, Fabi went e captures on d4, but now we have this interesting in-between move, rook to e8, which is extremely rare. It's been played only once before, but it actually comes with a threat. And now it's a bit different because after this threat of capturing, you also have the threat of just picking up the e4 pawn, as now it will be attacked twice. So what can you do here? Here Grischuk played a very original move. Here he's played knight to g5, which comes with a double attack on the f7 square. Fabi repeated rook to f8, and Grischuk went back, knight to f3. Here Fabi repeated rook to e8, and here Grischuk again repeated knight to g5, and it was in this position that they agreed to a draw. That, of course, is a joke. Of course, they did not agree to a draw here. After this rook to e8 repetition by Fabi, Grischuk started thinking, and he really started thinking. He thought for some 41 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, which is a lot, but it's not a lot for Grischuk time. In Grischuk time, that's moderate, as he tends to think even more for a single move. But here also we have a very nice, that's not that, a nice photo of the two of them. You can see Grischuk, that's about the same position as this one, staring at his clock as the time keeps running out. And here he goes for rook to e1, which is a temporary pawn sacrifice, but offers a lot of play. So Fabi immediately played e captures on d4 without much consideration. C captures on d4, and the knight captures on e4, grabbing that pawn. And now d5 with a double attack against the knight and also the bishop on a7. So here bishop captures on e3 by Fabi, rook captures on e3, and now knight to a7. And here Grischuk goes for queen to d4 with a double attack on the knight, and also with an attack on the knight here. And here, of course, you're expecting knight to c5 just to get both knights out of harm's way, but here Fabi immediately plays bishop to f5, saying, I'm still in a prepared line, and you have good luck with this. So what's the idea here? Obviously, there's the offering of a knight here. We reach the position from the thumbnail. But can the knight be captured or not? Well, that's a very difficult question to answer. In theory, yes, but it will be very hard to play it over the board. For example, after queen captures here, Fabi has knight to c5 plan. Now the threat is rook to b7 to trap the queen here. So you have to go for captures to eliminate the c7 pawn, and now knight captures on b3, attacking the rook, and also if the rook moves, the knight is under attack. So rook has to attack knight, and now knight back to c5, leaving the knight on b1 under attack. But now queen captures on d6, saying that, okay, if you capture this, I'm going to capture this guy over here. And now b4 by Fabi, pushing back the rook, and after the rook moves, you have to block the queen's influence on the e-file. queen to f8, now offering a queen trade, captures, and now as the knight is still under attack, knight bd2, and now the game continues, probably rook d8 and something where Fabi would be down a pawn, but he would have a bishop against a knight in a position that he's much more familiar with, that he analyzed at home deeply, and of course Grischuk, already very low on time, doesn't want to play this endgame. So that's basically what happens if you capture and then continue with perfect play. So here Grischuk instead went knight b to d2. He ignores the knight, now threatens to just win the piece here, and now knight back to c5 by Fabi. We have rook captures on e8, rook queen captures on e8, and now rook to e1, winning the e-file for the rook, queen to f8 by Fabi, and now bishop back to d1, getting the bishop out of harm's way. And now b4 by Fabi, wanting to go all the way with b3. We have bishop to e2, now shifting the bishop to a more useful diagonal and preparing to bring it all the way to f1. We have queen to d8 now, maybe with some ideas that, for example, if c6 is played, then maybe you can snap off the a5 pawn. So bishop to f1 back, and now comes h6, creating a breathing room for the king, also a nice escape square for the bishop if needed. Rook to e3, now controlling the d3 square. Before you couldn't really worry about something like this, as the knight would still hang. So here, first b3 by Fabi, pushing the pawn even further, and now comes queen to f4, attacking the bishop here. Bishop back to d7, and now comes knight to d4. And now the knight has access to f5, to c6 if needed, to b5, so a very useful square for the knight. We have rook to b4, Fabi now pins the knight as the queen is on f4, and now rook to g3, a very nice rook lift by Grischuk, and now maybe even queen captures on h6 is an idea. And here Fabi goes for queen to e7. So what's queen to e7? Why is queen captures on h6 off limits, and is it off limits? So let's say we capture, queen captures on h6. Why wouldn't we? Do you see what Fabi had in mind here? Even pause the video and try to figure it out while I have a nice sip of my water. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on being a magnificent defender. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it doesn't work because of queen e5. And now you defend mate, the knight still hangs, and you have to do something about it. The point is, if you move the knight, or if you defend the knight this way, it doesn't really matter, whichever move you make, queen captures on g3, that's the point. And now after captures, you just capture the queen on h6, because there's no longer the pin along the g-file, and at the end of the line, you are up a whole rook. So very sneaky move by Fabi, queen to e7, and now Grischuk goes after the b3 pawn. Bishop to c4 adds yet another attacker to the b3 pawn. Fabi goes knight to b5, and now knight 4 captures on b3. We have knight captures on b3, rook captures on b3 now, and queen to e1 with check. King goes to h2, and now rook captures on b3. We have knight captures on b3, and now queen to b4, putting more restraint on Grischuk's pieces. Now, of course, you cannot move the bishop because the queen hangs, so you have to do something about it. So here, Grischuk tries queen to e4. Probably an idea that if c6, you can maybe capture here, but Fabi says that will not work. Here, Fabi instead goes c5. He just advances the pawn, gets rid of his weak pawn on c7, and now says if you capture here, then bishop to e6 will be just ugly for you. So you cannot, in fact, capture here en passant. So after c5, we have queen to d3 now by Grischuk. And we have g6 now, so you don't have to worry about any threats along this diagonal. For example, if you want to go king f8, improve the position of the king, and so on. So after queen d3, we have g6, and now g4, not allowing bishop to f5 to kick away the queen, king to g7, and now king g2. And here we have knight to c7 by Fabi. Here, the engine slightly prefers bishop here. The point is, after queen to c7, Grischuk just exchange queens with queen to c3. Probably bishop to c8 is preferred as it waits. It doesn't give Grischuk the opportunity to immediately trade off queen, so maybe first go after the pawn and then go knight to c7 to create a double attack against the pawn. So maybe this is why it's slightly preferred. But okay, knight to c7, you also need to keep an eye on the pawn here. So of course, if bishop captures, you just capture, and after queen captures, you capture on b3, so it's not a problem. So here, just queen c3 check by Grischuk. We have queen captures, b captures, and now f5 by Fabi. And okay, knight back to d2 by Grischuk, saying that if you go for captures here, you lose control of the e4 square. That's why knight to d2 is very strong. For example, if captures, captures, and captures, just knight e4 will pick off this pawn, and there's not much you can do here. If you defend it, then of course the knight no longer defends the a6 pawn. So king to f6, Fabi starts bringing the king into the game. Now king g3, Grischuk does the same, and bishop to b5, hoping to fix his pawn structure here, but bishop to b3, avoiding the trade, and now bishop to e2, taking away squares from the white king. And here comes g captures on f5. We have g captures on f5, king captures on f5 seems like a more reasonable thing to do, not to mess up your pawn structure, but then after f4, you don't really have a way to play this with your king. These squares are all taken, so the king cannot approach anything. And if you want to, you can always maybe even kick away the king. It's even quite dangerous to keep your king there. If he didn't have the f6 square, it would be checkmate. For example, if the knight was here, then bishop c2 would lead to checkmate, for example. So have to be careful. So g captures on f5 instead, and now still f4, as all these squares are now covered. The black king cannot really use any means to approach the pawns, and now knight to b5, going after the c3 pawn. Grischuk attacks at c4, we have knight to c3, and now bishop back to c2, just keeping an eye on the e4 square. We have bishop to d1, offering a trade, and bishop to d3. Grischuk declines, and now knight to a2. Trying to get hold of some other pawns, maybe with ideas like knight here, maybe here if the knight moves, but still waiting for white to make a move. We have king to f2 and now knight to b4, going after the bishop, king to e3 and now bishop to c2, again with a double attack here. Bishop to e2 declining the trade, and knight back to a2. We have knight to f1 by Grischuk, and now knight to c1. Here we have king to d2 with a double attack, and here we just have a trade. Captures, king captures, of course not the bishop, as the f4 pawn would hang, so king captures here. And after bishop to a4, it was now in this position that they actually agreed to a draw on move 54. So here it's a draw because there's not much you can do here. All of the squares are taken, so you can't really advance your king through any squares. And it's just a very blocked position. The black also here controls the squares, so the white king cannot approach, and well, anything could happen. So either of them could maybe blunder or something, but of course both of them know that this is a draw and that there is no point in playing it out. So they agreed to a draw, and really a nice game. So again, Fabi in the same variation, almost in the same line, shows what kind of poison he can dig up, and it's on Grischuk to either take a draw in that position that we mentioned here after rook to e8. Do you just repeat knight g5 here and go back, rook here, or do you go for a 41-minute thing and go rook e1, like the brave Alexander Grischuk did? And then this whole game happens where he suffers for a long time, but in the end, he eventually finds out the truth. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. We're going to show at least one more game from round 6, and then we're going to discuss the standings. So I'm not going to show any now, just so I don't spoil it for some of you who are maybe not following the results as vividly. I would like to thank Harry Willis, Gleb Kovchenkov, Randall Ingersoll, David Dunn, and Daniel Bebing for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, of course, continuing the coverage of the Candidates Tournament. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.